smelled like cinnamon and something burning. The candles I lit that night were supposed to mark a celebration, the start of forever. He had proposed 2 weeks before. The ring still glistened on my finger, catching the flickering light as I stirred the pot on the stove. Our favorite meal, his favorite wine, my favorite playlist humming in the background like a lullaby to our future. I had spent hours making the night special. I wanted to surprise him, but I was the one who got surprised. He walked in late again. His eyes didn't light up like they used to. His kiss felt like obligation, not affection. He murmured something about traffic, something about a work call, something I wasn't really listening to. Because my hands were trembling. His phone had buzzed. A notification lit up the screen like a flashbang to my soul. Can't wait until she's out of the picture. Just a little longer, red heart. I stood still, as if frozen mid-breath. I read it again and again, hoping, begging I had misunderstood. I hadn't. The air turned heavy. The scent of cinnamon now felt sickening. The playlist seemed cruel. Some twisted soundtrack to a tragedy I didn't know I was living. My legs barely held me up as I asked, with a voice that didn't sound like mine, "Who is she?" He looked up, startled. His face twisted, not in guilt, but in calculation. For a moment he said nothing. Then he opened his mouth, and in that silence before the storm, I already knew. He knew. "She's my ex-wife. It's complicated." The words hit harder than any slap. I couldn't breathe. My hands went numb. My knees buckled as I backed into the counter for support. The ring on my finger suddenly felt like a lie made solid, a cold band of betrayal wrapped around my trust. My mind ran in 1,000 directions, but one truth was louder than the rest. I was never his future. I was his pause button, a distraction while he cleaned up the pieces of a past he never let go of. I was the warm body, the listening ear, the soft place to fall, until he could get back to the woman he really wanted. Every memory we had, every word he spoke, every promise he made, echoed now like ghost stories in an empty house. He tried to explain, said it wasn't what I thought, that he loved me, that it was over with her, that he was just confused. But how do you confuse an engagement ring? How do you confuse a woman who was ready to give you everything? How do you accidentally make someone your lifeline when all you wanted was a distraction? The tears didn't fall right away. First came silence. A silence so loud it screamed. Then came the shaking, the disbelief, the heartbreak ripping through the fabric of who I was, who I thought we were. I remember collapsing onto the floor beside the dinner table. The pasta overcooked, the candles flickering out one by one. His voice fading as he tried to reach me, but I was already sinking somewhere deeper, somewhere cold, somewhere I didn't recognize, somewhere I never asked to be. And in that abyss, one question echoed over and over, like a heartbeat in the dark. How do you rebuild a heart when the person who shattered it is the same one who once promised to protect it? Before the lies, before the silent unraveling of everything I thought was real, there was us. And I believed in us. I remember the first time he held my hand like it was something sacred. We were in a bookstore, of all places, reaching for the same battered copy of The Alchemist. He smiled, I smiled, and it felt like the universe smiled with us. That kind of moment that doesn't just happen, means something. Or so I told myself. He had this warmth about him, quiet confidence. He spoke slowly, like every word was meant to be remembered. And I did remember. I collected his words like love letters, playing them back on lonely nights, long drives, or in the space between dreams and waking. He said I made him feel alive again, that I was his peace, that he hadn't believed in love after what his ex-wife did to him. Until me. Felt like destiny, like a chance to heal each other. We fell into rhythm quickly. Sunday morning coffee in bed. Long walks with no destination. He memorized how I liked my tea. I memorized the way he sighed when he was tired but didn't want to admit it. I loved the way he touched me without needing to speak. A hand on the small of my back, a kiss to my forehead, fingers brushing mine when we crossed the street. He made the world quieter. And when he proposed, I cried. It wasn't dramatic. No big crowd. No flash mobs. Just us at the beach during sunset. The waves whispering things we'd never say out loud. He knelt, pulled out a simple ring and said, "I can't imagine my life without you." He looked into my eyes when he said it, held my hands. There was no hesitation. At least that's what I thought. I called my mother that night. I told my friends. I started a Pinterest board. I tried on dresses just for fun. Every morning I would glance at the ring and think, this is real. This is happening. But even then, there were cracks. Tiny ones. Whispers in the corners of our conversations. He never liked talking about his past. Said it was behind him. That it was too painful. But I remember one night, late after too much wine, he stared off and said, "You remind me of who I used to be." I laughed, not understanding what he meant. I thought it was romantic. But now I know I was a mirror, not a partner. There were other signs too. Texts he didn't let me see. Phone calls he took in another room. Times he said he was working late, but didn't sound tired, just distant. I told myself I was overthinking. That trauma makes you paranoid. That love means trust. And I trusted him. Against every gut feeling, every quiet instinct that screamed something wasn't right. He would come home and kiss me like nothing had changed. Bring flowers. Book weekend getaways. Whisper that I was his everything. And I wanted to believe him. Because we build futures out of hopes, not warnings. Because when someone shows you just enough love, you ignore the shadows. You close the windows. You draw the curtains on the truth. And I did. Over and over. Because the illusion of being loved felt safer than facing the possibility that I wasn't. But the thing about illusions is, they can't hold weight. Eventually everything collapses. And when it did, it wasn't just my trust that broke. It was the entire story I had written in my heart. They say intuition is a whisper. Never loud, never demanding. Just a soft tug at your ribs. A flicker of something off in the corner of your eye. I wish I had listened sooner. It started with the little things. Isn't that how it always begins? The phone, once so casually placed on the kitchen counter, started traveling with him everywhere. Even to the bathroom. Notifications suddenly had no previews. Messages disappeared before I could glance. He changed his passcode because of work stuff, he said, smiling as if that made sense. First I tried to laugh it off. You're being crazy, I told myself. He loves you. He proposed. He chose you. But love isn't supposed to make you feel like you're losing your mind. There was the weekend he said he was going to visit his parents. He kissed me goodbye, suitcase in hand, and promised to FaceTime when he got there. But the video call never came. Just a vague text. Battery low, I'll call tomorrow. He never did. When I pressed, he got defensive. Why don't you trust me? He snapped, voice sharp like a knife pressed against guilt. After everything we've been through. And just like that, I became the problem. I started shrinking. Apologizing for things I didn't do. Tiptoeing around his moods. Trying to be understanding because he was going through a lot. He said the divorce wasn't finalized. That there were complications. That she was being difficult. But I never saw any paperwork. He still lived with me. Still touched me like I was home. Still called me his person. But I began to feel like a shadow in my own relationship. Like I was standing beside a man who wasn't really there. Then came her. I didn't find her name. I didn't need to. The contact was saved under lawyer. But no lawyer sends heart emojis. I clicked on one message thread when he left his phone unlocked for exactly 90 seconds. It was enough. Enough to see the photos. The messages. The nicknames. The I miss yous. Enough to realize I wasn't the one. I was the other. The rage didn't come first. It was the confusion. The spinning of every memory like a broken carousel. The ache of wanting to scream but having no voice. The desperation of needing proof for something my heart already knew. I didn't confront him right away. I watched. Collected moments like evidence. Not for him but for me. I needed to see the truth so I could stop rewriting it. He started smelling different, like a cologne I didn't buy. He came home full even though I cooked. He laughed more but not with me. He started saying he was tired when I reached for him in bed. And my chest felt like it was caving in. Every day, I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me. I smiled when friends asked how the wedding planning was going. I told my mother everything was fine. But inside something was rotting. The final blow came on a Tuesday. I remember the rain. I remember the gray light leaking through the window. And I remember the look on his face when I asked simply, "Are you still in love with her?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Silence is its own confession. And in that moment, I felt every piece of me splinter. Because the man I gave my heart to, the one I said yes to, wasn't building a life with me. He was using me as a distraction from the wreckage of his old one. There's a moment in every heartbreak where you don't just grieve the person. You grieve the promise. And promises don't bleed. They haunt. After that night, after the question he didn't answer, I still stayed. I wish I could say I left right then. That I walked out with dignity and never looked back. But the truth is far more fragile, far more human. I clung to the ghost of what we had. He apologized eventually. Said he was confused. That he didn't know how to let go of his past. That his ex was manipulating him. Pulling him back into chaos. He said I was his calm. His anchor. That I was the only thing that made sense anymore. And I wanted to believe it. God, I needed to believe it. Because if I didn't, what did that make me? Just a placeholder. A soft place to land while he sorted out his guilt. I told myself he loved me. That this was just a mistake. Faith. That maybe he needed time and I could give him that. Love waits, doesn't it? So I stayed. We had good days. Even after the truth cracked open between us. Days where he held me close and whispered things like, "Let's start over." Days where we made love like we were trying to erase the betrayal from our skin. Days where he cooked for me, played our songs, traced circles on my back like he used to. But they never lasted. One moment he was present, attentive, the man I had fallen in love with. And the next he was cold, distant, lost in thought, staring at nothing. His phone always too close to his hand. And I was unraveling in the silence between us. I tried everything. Therapy. Conversations. Boundaries. I asked for transparency. I begged for honesty. I offered him space. Then suffocated him with questions when I couldn't take the silence anymore. Each time I thought we were healing, something would pull us back under. Began blaming myself. Maybe I wasn't patient enough. Maybe I was too emotional. Maybe if I were prettier, more chill, less needy. I spiraled into the kind of self-doubt that eats you alive from the inside out. He never said I was the problem, but he didn't have to. His inaction spoke louder than any cruel word. He let me carry the weight of his indecision. And still I stayed. I stayed because walking away felt like admitting defeat. Like all the love I had given was for nothing. Like I had failed. But one night, one final, unbearable night, everything snapped. We were out at dinner. I had dressed up, tried to recreate the early spark, laughed too hard at his jokes, touched his hand across the table. And for a moment I saw it, a flicker of the man I loved, until his phone lit up. And he smiled. Not at me. He didn't realize he'd done it. That unconscious, familiar kind of smile. The kind you save for someone who knows you. Someone you miss. Someone who isn't sitting right in front of you, trying to convince herself she's still enough. I excused myself to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Tired. Desperate. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't in love anymore. I was hoping he would change. Hoping he would choose me. Hoping I hadn't wasted years of my life on a man who was already halfway out the door. Hope had become a form of self-harm. So I wiped my tears, walked back to the table, and asked the question that would burn everything down for good. Do you still talk to her? He hesitated, and that hesitation was my answer. He blinked. once. Like he was trying to buy time. Trying to rearrange the truth into something palatable. Something that wouldn't blow everything apart. But the pause said it all. You don't pause when the answer is no. He looked down at his plate. The candlelight between us flickered, casting shadows across a table set for two people pretending to still be in love. Yes, he finally said, quietly, almost apologetically. But it's not what you think. Not what I think. I think you proposed to me while still emotionally married to someone else. I think you held me while writing I miss you to another woman. I think I said yes to a man who was using my love as a crutch for his guilt. Think you broke me. And I think you knew you would. But I didn't say any of that. Not then. Instead, I placed my napkin slowly on the table and stared at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time since this all began, I saw a stranger. A man who didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but was willing to destroy anyone who loved him just to feel whole again. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. Because when pain has exhausted every corner of your heart, there's nothing left but clarity. I'm not your therapy, I whispered. I'm not your distraction. I'm not a soft place to land while you decide who you miss more. He reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled away. No, I said. You don't get to touch me like that anymore. Tears welled in his eyes. Maybe they were real. Maybe they weren't. I'll never know. And in that moment I didn't care. 'Cause I was real. My love was real. And I had spent too long trying to prove I was worthy of being chosen by a man who never stopped loving someone else. He followed me out of the restaurant, calling my name, pleading for a second chance. Said he'd end it for good. Said he'd prove it. Said he was scared, confused, that I was the best thing to ever happen to him. But if I was the best thing, why did he treat me like an intermission? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just kept walking. The city lights blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. My heels clicked against the pavement like a drumbeat of finality. And with every step, I felt the weight of him fall away. When I got home, I took off the ring. Not gently. Not with reverence. I yanked it from my finger like it was burning me. Like it had branded me with a lie. And then, I sat on the edge of my bed and exhaled the heaviest breath I'd ever held. I had loved deeply. I had believed fully. I had forgiven endlessly. But I was done bleeding for someone who only offered bandages made of words. That night I slept alone. But for the first time in months, I slept in peace. And peace, I would come to learn, is far more valuable than any promise made by someone who never intended to keep it. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with trumpets or grand awakenings or sudden sunrises. It comes in moments, almost imperceptible ones, like the first morning you wake up and don't check your phone for their name. The first time you make coffee for one and it doesn't ache. The first laugh that escapes your chest without feeling like betrayal. That's how it started for me. The silence that once haunted me began to feel like space. Room to breathe. To stretch. Be. I deleted his number. Blocked her name. Cleared the messages, the photos, the wedding folder on my laptop. I never wanted to look at again. Felt like pulling teeth from my heart. But each deletion was a liberation. A slow, steady dismantling of a future that was never really mine. I started going to therapy. The first session, I sat across from a woman who looked at me and said, "Tell me what you've been carrying." And I broke. Not in anger. Not in chaos. But in exhaustion. Because being lied to is one thing. But lying to yourself every day just to survive, that will destroy you in ways no heartbreak ever could. So I began to speak. To write. To unravel. And in that unraveling, I found pieces of myself I didn't know I'd lost. I joined a yoga class. Not to be spiritual or graceful, just to learn how to exist in my own body again. To move for me. I traveled, small weekend trips at first. I learned to eat alone at restaurants without shrinking. To walk through bookstores without remembering his hand in mine. One night, months later, I passed by a couple sitting on a bench. She was laughing. He was brushing a lock of hair from her face. Looked like love. And for the first time it didn't hurt. I didn't want to be them. I didn't want him. I just wanted peace, and I finally had it. My friends stopped tiptoeing around his name. I could tell the story without shaking. I could say, he betrayed me, and not feel shame. Because that betrayal wasn't about my worth. Never was. It was about his inability to face his own reflection. And I was a mirror far too honest for his comfort. With time I began to trust again. Not in others but in myself. In my gut. In the way my heart warns me when something feels off. I stopped mistaking intensity for intimacy. I stopped romanticizing chaos. I stopped shrinking to fit into someone else's unfinished story. And somewhere along the way I found softness again. In small friendships. In strangers' kindness. In my own voice when it stopped apologizing. I even went on a date. He wasn't the one, but he made me laugh. And I looked him in the eyes without searching for someone else in his reflection. That to me was a victory. We think survival is about enduring the pain. But true survival, it's learning to find beauty again, even when you're still scarred. Especially when you're still scarred. I used to think love was about holding on. Now I know sometimes love is learning when to let go. Not just of someone but of the version of yourself that begged to be enough. There's a kind of silence that follows betrayal. Not the absence of noise, but the stillness of truth. The echo that comes after the door slams, the ring is removed, the future you built in your head dissolves. And in that silence, I met myself. Not the woman he wanted me to be. Not the cool, easy, understanding version I twisted into just to keep him from drifting. For me, the woman who gives deeply, who believes fiercely, who stayed too long because she loved too hard, but who finally walked away because she loved herself more. People ask me now if I hate him. The truth. Well, I don't have space for hate. Hate still ties you to someone. Still lets them live rent-free in your mind, your body, your breath. And I've already paid enough. What I feel now is clarity. He didn't destroy love for me. He didn't poison my future. He just taught me the sharp difference between being chosen and being used. Between a ring and a real commitment. Between comfort and connection. Between a man looking for an escape and a man ready to build. And the hardest part, I didn't lose him. He was never mine. What I lost was the version of myself that thought I had to earn love. That thought being patient meant being silent. That mistook breadcrumbs for a feast. And in that loss, I was reborn. Now I love slower. Easier. I ask harder questions. I set boundaries I don't apologize for. I don't chase. I watch, with my eyes open and my heart intact. I no longer fear being alone. I fear being misused. Because loneliness in your own bed is better than emptiness beside someone who never really saw you. So if you're listening, if you're watching this, sitting in the ruins of a love that betrayed you, I want you to know this. You are not foolish for loving. You are not broken for staying. You are not weak for hoping. You were brave. You showed up with your whole heart. And now, it's time to show up for yourself. Not with revenge. Not with bitterness. But with a softness that says, I deserved more than this. A strength that says, next time I will know better. Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering differently. From a place of power, not pain. And maybe one day you'll be sitting across from someone. Not a distraction, not a stand-in, not a maybe, but someone whole. And you'll recognize them. Because you'll already be whole too. So I leave you with this. Would you forgive someone who shattered your heart while looking you in the eye and calling it love? Or would you finally, mercifully, choose you? If this story touched you, share it. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone in the aftermath. Someone out there is searching for a sign that walking away is okay. Let this be it.